Environmental collapse, mental health pandemics, a culture-wide crisis of meaning. Must Western civilization fall, and will we, its children, fall with it? I will explore the hidden layers of our psyche in search of answers.
What's the meaning of life? If you're going to ask that question anywhere, a cathedral seems like the right place to start. Walk into most churches and you get a pretty familiar answer. Whether it's from the priest, the scriptures, or those old paintings on the walls. Life is basically a test run. How you live determines whether you end up in eternal bliss or eternal punishment. Be good, have faith, follow God's word. But this church, Grace Cathedral here in San Francisco, offers different teaching. This is a spiritual center for the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. Think drag queen nuns. Since 1979, these performers have been mixing irreverence with activism, shock with healing. Their mission to expiate stigmatic guilt and promulgate universal joy. Sounds fancy, but what they are really doing is holding up a mirror to some uncomfortable truths that sometimes religion hurts the very people it claims to save. That rebels might show more real compassion than the institutions preaching mercy. And that maybe, just maybe, putting on a show can be its own form of prayer.
The Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence were founded right here in San Francisco in 1979. And we had no idea that this would become a worldwide organization, because at the time the sisters were all sitting around and they were bored. They were bored with the fact that so many people in the gay community looked alike. It was what they called the Castro clone. Gay men all dressed like they stepped off a roll of paper towel, like a Brawny man or a Marlboro man. They had mustaches, they had leather coats, they had flannel shirts. They were very masculine and everybody looked the same. So our sisters had roots in the fairies and the radical fairies and connections to the coquettes, who were outrageous, outlandish, colorful beings in our community. And they decided that they wanted to stir things up. And one of the sisters, whose name was Ken Bunch, who would become Sister Vicious, Power Hungry, had a bunch of nuns' habits that he had borrowed from a convent in Iowa, and for some reason brought with him when he moved to San Francisco. So they were sitting around and they said, let's put on those nuns' habits and just go out on the streets and see what happens. And they did just that, but they also discovered that they all had really deep spiritual connections to the world and to the community. They cared about immigrants, they cared about public safety, and when HIV/AIDS reared its ugly head in the early 80s, the sisters really found their purpose. A lot of people don't know that the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence in San Francisco were the first group ever to produce a safer sex pamphlet that used plain language, and it was it was very humorous. It was called Playfair. Now it's known as the world's first ever safer sex pamphlet. And the sisters were also one of the first organizations to hold a fundraiser for people who needed help to pay for their rent, and they needed help. They were sick and dying. They had lost their jobs. A lot of their friends and family were afraid of them. They wouldn't even touch them. And the sisters said, these people need help, like they need money, and we need to teach our community how to prevent this transmittable disease. I joined the order in 1987. I had moved to San Francisco from Grand Rapids, Michigan, where I went to a private Catholic college, Aquinas College, hey. And I honestly was pretty self-absorbed. I was very much interested in coming to San Francisco and drinking and getting laid. And that's what I did for about 2 years. I met my friend Norman, who came out to me as Sister Luscious Lashes, and he introduced me to the sisters. And that's when I realized that I cared. It was like my head exploded, and I just went, oh my God, I care about my community. I care about civil rights. I need to get involved. There is a rally, a political cause that we can go and support, a picket sign we can carry. We will be there. We support women's breast cancer. We support trans youth. We support the arts. I mean, the list is just endless of things that we do. A lot of people have a misconception about the sisters. They like to look at us and think that we're blasphemous, that we're mocking nuns, that we're making fun of God and the church and religion, and nothing could be farther from the truth. The sisters actually are a spiritual organization of modern day nuns. We're queer and trans people who minister to our community much like a Catholic nun would. The issue that we have in this country more and more, and other places around the world, is that people have decided to weaponize their personal religious beliefs and use those as a way to control other people. I've been waiting for the bus, and I've seen a person sitting there, clearly unhoused, poorly dressed, dirty, with enormous, swollen, bleeding legs, barefoot. And I just, I said, oh my God, I said, do you have shoes or socks? No, I don't have any. And my bus was coming, and I said, hold on, and I took my shoes off. And I gave him my socks. And I put my shoes back on, and I got on the bus.
The story of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence shows that the spiritual movement doesn't need a crucifixion, a revelation, or a prophet in the desert. Sometimes it begins with a few friends who are simply tired of everyone looking and acting the same. It doesn't have to declare war on other traditions. It can slip into one of them, borrow its symbols, and wear them with a wing. And it can grow not through grand proclamations, but through small acts. Handing a pair of socks to a man waiting for the tram. Listening to someone who's been ignored. For Spell of the Western Psyche, I'm Marcin Fabjanski in San Francisco, where Western religion has found one of its most flamboyant and compassionate forms.